Hello, welcome to Marathon Swim Stories, where we connect with curious and courageous individuals from all walks of life to explore our relationship with water, what holds people back, and why others keep going, where we investigate the connection that we have with each other, those who support us, and the water that is 70% of our planet. If you've ever stood at the edge of a body of water and wondered, you're in good company. I'm Shannon Keegan, mom, wife, marathon swimmer, swim efficiency coach, and founder of Intrepid Water, where I teach swim freedom, virtually, locally, and abroad. The freedom to get started, break out of your comfort zone, or shatter your preconceived notions of what's possible. Find out more at intrepidwater.com. Hello, listeners. I'm embarrassed that I've been holding on to this story for so long. I thought that I'd lost it, and then I found it, and then I got caught up in all the things. You know how it goes. Sometimes I get stuck. Do you get stuck? Fortunately, I have a community to lean into. A community of swimmers and deep thinkers who are looking to do more than just get to the other side. Of course, we don't want to take forever to get there either, so we talk about swimming technique and the benefits of finding your body in the water. This month, the theme is time management, which, if I'm honest, is not my strong suit. But that's the whole point of being in community. We learn from each other. And I'm endeavoring to get better at time management every day. If you haven't already, join me at the water's edge. Click the join link in the show notes. Without further ado, I'm excited to share today's story with you. I virtually met Lorelei Schmidt in 2020. Well, actually, I virtually met Lorelei's mother, Tammy, who reached out to me to see if Lorelei, who was only 11 or 12 at the time, could be part of the Build to Marathon virtual swim series that I was hosting. It's been phenomenal to witness her journey from afar, and I found it intriguing to hear what it was like for a teenager during the pandemic, and to hear how driven Lorelei is. This is just part one. In part two, we get an update on all of her swims since she took home the coveted belt buckle at SCAR in 2024. I hope you enjoy Lorelei's story. I'm very excited to be here today with Lorelei Schmidt, who just came back from SCAR, which I can't wait to hear about. But we want to hear, Lorelei, tell us your story.
From what I've been told, I started taking swimming lessons when I was about 18 months old. I had family in Florida, so I was constantly there. So surrounded by water, it was like, well, you might as well know how to swim. But I didn't start doing competitive swimming until I was about 6 or 7 and joined a summer league team. But I wanted to do it more often. So when I was 7, I joined my first year-round team, going by the weird name of the Gypsy Divers. I had a great coach there. That's actually where most of my instructors between like the ages of 3 to 6 were. I just didn't join their team until I was 7 because that was kind of their age limit. They didn't want too many youngsters. But my first coach, I have to thank for teaching me basically all that I know right now for swimming, because he was the one that got me really into the whole racing side of the sport. And he taught me a lot of how to perfect my technique the best I could as, a 7-year-old. When I was 8, I switched teams and went to the Marlins of Raleigh. And I think probably because of the coach I had before, he was the reason that I ended up in a much higher group than I would be if I was at that age, because my technique was pretty good for an 8-year-old. And I just loved the coaches I had there. The team was huge. My group was huge. And they were all around the same age, mostly a little older, 9, 10, a few other 8-year-olds. I really started getting into it when I was 10. And at the time, it's when I thought I was a sprinter. That did not stick. And the only really big accomplishment I had was when I was with my team in Virginia for a summer meet, so long course. And I was with three other girls, and we set the 200-meter freestyle national record for the relay and never did anything close to that since. And then, like, the year later, COVID hit.
So you were like 11?
Yeah, I was about 11, just turned 11 when COVID really hit. So, well, all the pools shut down. Everything was haywire because, like, we're in a pandemic. Like, what's going on here? My team did a virtual dry land, kind of. So everyone was on a Zoom meeting and doing dry land. And I say doing dry land, most of them had their cameras off. I was one of them from time to time. But I needed to swim. I'm not a runner, hated running, mostly because of asthma. Biking, I'd go around and bike, but it just like wasn't the same. Too much energy still left in me. So we decided that we were going to go hop into the closest lake we have here in North Carolina, Falls Lake. And it was just short, like probably no more than like 1,000 meters every time I hopped into the lake. Just swimming in circles in a little cove. Now it's during the summer and Falls Lake heats up to almost 90 degrees when it gets hot out here. And my little 11-year-old self used to pool temperature water, felt like, well, this is great. It's nice and warm, a little gross because we have a red clay bottom, but I learned to get used to it. And then I just wanted to go farther. And it started with what like 1,000 meters turned into 2,000 meters. And I would do that every single day. And I eventually kind of got brave enough to go swim with some of the boys of my group. Now they're about 3-4 years older than I am and a lot faster, but they had been doing the open water champs that we have here. So they were more experienced than I was, but they kind of, for about a month or two, took me under their wing and let me follow them out there into the lake. It wasn't probably more than 3,000 meters every time we went out there, and they'd just leave me in the dust. They would leave me in the dust. And they'd just go out there, and I didn't actually mind getting left in the dust. I wasn't expecting to be able to keep up with them. But it was just the fact that I could get out there and not always be alone out there was nice.
I'm training for a 50-mile swim this year, but this isn't just about distance. Every stroke teaches me something new about moving efficiently through the water, trust, and resilience. I want to share these lessons with you. Want to explore them together? Join me at the water's edge, my virtual community where everything changes. Hesitation meets courage, comfort meets challenge, potential becomes movement, and individual meets community. Tap the join link in the show notes. Did you ever have any, open water fears or anything like, so you swam sometimes in Florida when you were really little, so you had some kind of context for open water maybe?
Not really. I think at the time when everything started, I didn't even know that open water was a thing. It's like people just swim in lakes for fun from jumping off of boats. Like, what crazy person hops into a lake just to swim, like actually swim? Then I became the crazy person that I thought everyone that did that was. And then about a few months later, the pools opened back up, but it was very weird because in a 25-yard pool, there's 5 swimmers a lane, but everyone had to be social distancing. So we had one person on each end of the wall, and then one person at each flag, and then 2 people about 5 yards apart in the middle. and that's where you'd start, that's where you'd finish. And it was a very awkward because our coaches kind of had to separate us out by time or else we'd all be getting run over. And just surrounded by all the people and constricted to a lane, it felt weird after spending so much time swimming in a lake. And in 2020, I entered the virtual Grand Slam with Mark Johnson. And that was probably the first time I actually got out there and did open water, like not just swimming in a little area of a lake, but actually crossing the lake. And that was probably one of the first things that really got me into this. And I was like, hey, I kind of like this. I like being out there in the water with nothing constricting me. I kind of like being alone out there. I mean, I have my mom in the kayak to make sure I didn't drown, but it was nice. It was most of the time peaceful, minus the few boaters that were out there, but it was nice to just hop in and swim.
What was the longest distance that you had that I can't remember in Mark's event? What was the longest distance of that one?
I can't remember either. Probably somewhere 5, 10K, somewhere in there. Later that year, I did the Build to a Marathon. And it took a long time to like actually do all those swims because a 5K, I'm like, that's preposterous. Like, I don't even do 5,000 yards every practice. And you're just wanting me to swim like a 5K straight. And I would stop like every 20 minutes and hang on to the side of the kayak and be like, why am I doing this again? And then my mom finally told me to just suck it up. And we went to Lake Gaston, and the water was like 75, and I was freezing. I was not used to water being in the 70s. And she had me swim the whole 5K without stopping. Almost ran into a few fishing nets, and she would yell at me for that, but steered me around those. And it took me about an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes to swim. I'm like, I am not doing that again. That was way too much swimming. That was my first full 5K without stopping. And then after that, there was the 10K, and logging that swim, it was in Falls Lake again. The water was also in the 70s, which I'd finally just decided I was just going to suck it up, hop in. It was cold at first for me, but then after swimming for like an hour, I was like, this is kind of nice now. I'm warmer. And I did it with a few friends, well, the parents of a few friends. And it was pretty choppy out there, choppier than what I was used to. And it took me about 3 hours, somewhere 3 hours, maybe a little over. And I climbed out of the water and like, never again. I'm going to stick to those 5Ks and do nothing more. That was horrible. I hated every moment of that.
Did you wait? So you said that after your first 5K that you were never doing it again. How did you get convinced to do the 10K?
My mom was like, well, you started this, you're going to finish it.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, my mom was a huge motivator. It was more like stubborn nitpicking, being like, you started something, now you're going to finish it, you're going to suck it up, you're going to do it. And there was a bit of complaining on my part, being like, why? I don't want to do it. And after doing the 10K, I'm like, okay, the 5K is not so bad. So I got used to doing the 5Ks and didn't want to do any 10Ks again because I'm like, that's just way too long. But again, my mom kind of convinced me to be like, you like being out here. I like kayaking out here because it's beautiful. I'd like to be out here longer. So you're going to swim further. So I did. And then 5Ks turned into 6Ks. And then I got used to that. And then I went to like 7.5Ks. And then did that for a while. And then, because no school, no like barely any swim practice, I could go out there basically almost every day, every other day. And then it slowly turned into easing up into a 10K. And then I would get used to swimming that distance after a few times of complaining about it, being like, my shoulders hurt. This was horrible.
And this is how long after that initial kind of 5K, 10K? Are we talking in the next year or?
That was probably almost about a year later. Definitely not a fast process at all. It took a long time to finally get comfortable with that distance. And as it just continued on, my pool swimming also changed. It got from the point where I was like, I love sprinting, I love the 50 and the 100 freestyle, to the point where I'm like, the 50 and 100 freestyle are too short. I was not a 200 freestyler, still am not. So I tried the 500, and the first time I did it was in a really, really overheated pool with a really horrible chlorine concentration. I was just dying, couldn't breathe. First time ever like trying to race it, and I burnt myself out way too early. Even after doing all those 10Ks, still couldn't sprint a whole 500, especially not while trying to breathe properly. But my coach was like, the next meet, I'm going to sign you up for the 500. And I'm like, did you not see what happened my last 500? He was like, well, we'll be in a more open pool. It's a nice pool. Can't remember where it is now because we've only ever been there once. And I dropped a whole minute and a half that second time. And I was like, okay, I like this. Coach was like, I now deem you a distance swimmer. And I would go on the weekends still to the lakes. And depending on just how I was feeling from practice that week, I'd either go a 5K or I'd do a 10K.
This is in addition to pool swimming. So you're doing practice and then going to the lake. Okay.
Yeah, because my practices then were probably 3,000 yards. It wasn't a lot. Just trying to fit in what we could with all the social distancing. And then I noticed the Global Swim Series, and they were doing a swim in Egypt. And my mom was like, okay, we'll stick to the more closer travel parts for open water. Let's not go to Egypt just yet. I was like, okay. But I saw it was, I think, like somewhere between like a little more than a 10K, I think, in the Red Sea. And they were talking about all these coral reefs and these fish and these beautiful crystal blue waters. And I'm like, I want to do that. That sounds like fun. Like, I get to go out there, I get to swim. I'm in Sharm with a bunch of people, but I get to see all of that while swimming. And it's not just me staring at some murky water or the black tiles at the bottom of the pool. It's like actual sea life. So my mom looked into some open water swims that were more nearby. There's not very many that are actually close in North Carolina. We are a big pool swimming state, but open water, not so much, unless you're in Wilmington. So there's a swim there called Stoked to Go Out. That was really my first open ocean swim. It was going from one pier to another. It was about 1.7 miles and not particularly challenging after getting used to all the 10Ks, but going against the waves, and the water was definitely much colder, probably upper 60s. And just when I finished, I'm like, that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed being out there in the waves and the wind, running into the water and then running back out. I'm like, I enjoyed every moment of that. And so my mom was like, all right, guess we'll find some more of these kind of races. So my next one was actually back in Florida, called the Luckiest Lake Swim, the Golden Mile. And it's just like this huge, huge party down there in Orlando. There's like 200 people of all ages. Like you'll find like there's an 8-year-old swimming one year, someone all the way up to was about 99.
Wow. And you're like 13 at this point?
Yeah, this is like a huge community. down in Florida. And it was only a mile, but it was like so much fun. Kind of wished it was longer distance. And at the time, then now I had gotten used to swimming in 70 to 60-degree water. And so Florida, the water is never that cold. So it's like 80. I'm like, I'm glad I was only swimming a mile in that temperature, but I enjoyed that. I got to meet Rowdy, and they hand out for the top 3 females and the top 3 males. Overall, they get these real huge bronze, silver, and gold medals. And I'm like, I'm going to keep coming back here because I want to get those medals. So I've gone there every year since then. I'm like, it's still really hot, but it's still a lot of fun. And I'm inching closer and closer to getting one of those medals.
Doing mostly miles at this point, right?
Yeah, mostly miles. Still going to the lake when I could. And then my mom asked me, there are some races that are 5Ks and 10Ks. And I'm like, cool, where are they? She's like, well, the one that's going to take you in is all the way in Las Vegas.
Right, because you're only 13.
Yeah, 12, actually.
12, yeah. Yeah, that's for event directors. That's yeah, young participant.
Yeah. So I swam, they had the Las Vegas open water champs, and they had a 12 and under age group, actually. So there was a few 10-year-olds because the sandpipers are out there. So they have a really big open water community as well. And that's where I really got exposed to this whole open water community and everyone like doing these not quite so big swims, but just doing the 5Ks and 10Ks as races and not just swims. So I did the 5K, and I just loved doing that. I just felt like that was my happy place, realizing just to hop in and knowing I'm going to be swimming for over an hour. I'm like, this does not compare to being in a pool. In a pool, I'm confined to a lane. I'm crowded around several people and flip turns. I did not like flip turns. But out here, I felt free. And I did a few of the open water champs here in North Carolina. I did the Poseidon, which is basically a 2K, then a 3K, then a 5K. And I was like, just throw me in there and let me do a straight 10K. It makes my life easier. And my first big swim, or big race really, was the Chesapeake Bay when I was 13. 4.5 miles between the 2 bridges. And I was told all of these logistic things like you have to stick to this side of the bridge and the winds are crazy and the chop is all over the place and don't hit the bridge side because you'll tear your back open. And I'm like, kind of second guessing myself now. And I had watched, that was a stupid decision on my part, but I think my mom did it on purpose. Jaws. I'd watched Jaws a few days before going to the swim. And then my mom pulled up a shark tracker and there was like a shark of 10 miles out from the bridge. And I was like,
Have a talk with your mom. That's not cool.
no, just no. But that was the first swim where I had just this more major lack of control. Because when I had done Stoked to go out, I was right there, right next to the beach. I could hop out at any moment. And then every other thing I'd done was in a lake. But in Chesapeake, I couldn't do that. And when they were saying that the swells and the winds were huge, they were not kidding. I was being like lifted up into the air and dropped. If I put my head down for a few seconds, I'd be from one side of one of the bridge to the complete other side of the bridge. Had my first encounter with little sea nettles. And I had someone on my foot the whole time. And they kept hitting my foot in a way that was like, felt hard and rough. I'm like, there's a shark behind me. There's a shark behind me. And I had climbed out of the water. I was shaking. I'm like, that was horrible. That was horrible. And I'd gone to practice literally the next morning because it was summer and we had 5 a.m. practices. And I had just moved up age groups. So I was in a new group. And I had hopped into that water, nice, warm, supposedly chill water. I was doing backstroke, and it was long course. And there was something holding the ropes together, and it touched my foot, and I flipped out in the pool. I got weird looks from everyone as I literally stopped in the middle of the pool and screamed my head off. My coach had to drag me out of the water, me having a full-blown panic attack. I'm like, I can't do this. I cannot do this. And it took me like 3 days to finally be like, I'm in the pool. I'm in the pool. I'm not back out there. So I just did the pool for a while. I'm like, I'm not going near a giant body of water again for a little while. And my mom finally went like, you want to try going to the lake again? It's really calm outside, and we'll just go like 1,000 yards. So I did that and then hit 1,000 yards. My mom's like, do you want to go back? And I'm like, no, I just want to keep going. I'm fine out here right now. And then I started listening to your stories, going back and forth from different places, listened to a lot of them when we went to Virginia for Thanksgiving with the family, Virginia Beach. And I'm like, wow, swimming that much, that's insane. That's so cool how they can do that. And everyone thought I was crazy because we were by the beach. The water was pretty cold, but I thought it felt great. And I would just fully clothed, hopped into the ocean and swam while all of them were walking.
This is during your Thanksgiving.
Yeah, in Virginia. But I kept listening to all of these different stories of like these people doing the English Channel and Catalina and New York. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. I don't know how they do it. Like, I don't think I could do it. That was my thought at the time. But I told my mom, that's really cool. I kind of almost want to try it. And she's like, all right, I'll do some research. I'll see if there's something more not quite as intense that you can do. And that's where we met up with Sylvia and Kelly of Pacific Open Water. And they're like, a great place to start would be Lake Tahoe. So it took a lot of communication back and forth, being like, okay, so what do I need to do? What are feeds? How many miles is this again? Like, what do I need to think about?
So wait a sec. On the 10Ks, you hadn't done feeding or anything like that?
No, I just hopped in and went. I didn't even know that was a thing. I think my mom had like a bottle of water because the water was super hot and disgusting. And she was like, okay, do you need to rinse out your mouth or cool down and hydrate? But that was really all I had. And I would hold on to the side of the kayak doing it. So it was like 2 months of just communication back and forth. A lot of times, mainly just with Kelly. My coach at the time was like, what in the world are you doing? I'm like, I'm not entirely sure. I want to try something out. And he looked at me like I was insane and finally just decided to be like, you know what? I give up. You do you. I don't care anymore. Didn't exactly approve of it the whole time, but at the same time, didn't exactly try to stop me. He voiced his complaints about it, but never tried to do anything. I'm nothing if not stubborn. So I'm like, I want to do this, so I'm going to do it. I don't care what you say about it. This is something I like doing, so I'm going to do it. And the time I got to Tahoe, I was 14, and we were going to do 2 swims. I was going to do the True Width and Viking's Home. They had decided that the length of Tahoe was probably a little too long for me, who had just started, who had doing all of this and just got into the marathon swimming world. And they're like, it's a good place to start if you want to do marathon swimming. It's long, but it's not like overly difficult. And the first one I did was the True Width that week, literally the day after I landed that morning. So I was still on East Coast time, hadn't yet been affected by altitude. So it was about started at 2 in the morning over there, which for me felt like 5. So I was like, whatever. And the water was probably mid to upper 60s. So for me, I was like, ooh, cold at first, but okay, this kind of feels nice. This feels really nice. And I remember just standing on the edge of the boat, waiting to swim to the start and being like, really second guessing myself. I'm not like these people. I'm 14. These people are so much older than me. They have so much more experience. Like, what am I doing here? And then I finally just sucked it up and hopped into the water, climbed out. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And started the swim. And I didn't actually process what I was doing. I just put my head down, swam feed to feed, listened to the most random assortments of songs in my head, just and able to look at the stars from where I was. This is my happy place. And I truly didn't register like what I had done until I walked upon the beach, put my arms up and finished that first swim, got back on the boat and it was registered like, oh my God, I just did that. I was sore, I was tired, but that whole time I felt great. Like my stroke felt good, it felt strong. And I'm like, I loved this. I loved it. And we stayed there for a while. My next swim wasn't until about 3 to 4 days later. And we went up on the gondolas, I remember, like way up there where we could see over the entire lake. And my mom pointed out there and be like, you see that? You just crossed the width of that lake. It looks so much bigger from up there. We can actually look at the size of it. I'm like, yeah, I did. I did. I crossed that lake. Vikings home did not go quite as smoothly. I think the altitude had finally hit me, and I was still kind of stiff, but I hopped in there. I was like, this still feels great. I feel more free than I ever have when I was swimming. And the views of the sunset and then the Vikings home castle, I'm like, this is so worth it. Being able to go all over the place to swim and swim this long and be able to see all this stuff around you, this is phenomenal. So my observer that day was talking to my mom on the boat about all of these different types of marathon swims out there. And my mom, being the type A person that she was, had a notepad and pen on her and was writing down all of the different swims that she was talking about. And the one that she mentioned, which was also one that I had overheard on these podcasts, was Molokai. And I'm like, okay, trip to Hawaii. Let's go. Go swim in Hawaii. And they're like, it's 28 miles. I'm like, it's a trip to Hawaii. But they said, maybe get a little more training in. Don't do it this year. Do it the next year. So we're like, all right, we have our spot reserved anyways. We'll just won't pay the final deposits until we're ready to. And then going back and forth, I've heard all of these horror stories of Molokai of swimmers running into cookie cutter sharks and the man of war and then being surrounded by tiger sharks. And I'm like, what did I just get myself into? But I had also heard of Catalina and swim around Manhattan, and I want to do those. Now, I've heard a lot of people like saying, I want to go after the Ocean 7. And I'm like, I'm good. I want to go there not to check off a swim. I didn't want to check a box. I wanted to just go there and swim. I wanted to enjoy myself while I was out there and have the best experience that I can and not go there to just be like, hey, I did this. I wanted to go there and be like, hey, I did this because I just wanted to. I didn't want to meet up to all those like Ocean 7 stuff and go all over the place to do those. I just wanted to go there just to swim. So took a while to get around just all the stuff needed. And we finally got slots for Catalina and Manhattan and finally started talking with Mark. more and more. And he was like, with your passion for open water, I think you'd do really good in SCAR. And my observer for Vikings Home said the same thing, like, you would do great at SCAR. And once again, it was something I had heard about from your podcast. And I'm like, but there's all these big names here. They're all so much older than me. Some of them have done this like every year since it started. And here's me, this little 14-year-old girl from North Carolina, hopping in there. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. And I'm like, if I'm going to go there, I'm going to try and chase down that belt buckle. And my observer and Sylvia were like, okay, you want to get into SCAR? So we submitted our application, and apparently Sylvia or someone talked to him, and because a few days later, my mom sent me an email in the middle of my band class, and we weren't doing anything that day. And I checked out my email, and had I been playing, I probably would have fallen out of my chair. Because it was like, your application has been accepted for SCAR. We can't wait to see you there, and we're hoping that your swim will bring in even more young swimmers. And I was like, oh my God, this is happening. I got into like one of the biggest things in open water swimming. So Mark started to coach me on that, just gave me tips and pointers and be like, you just have to worry about your own swim. He got advice from past belt buckle winners, past finishers, and all of them were like, you just got to focus on your own swim. If you want it bad enough, you know you'll put your head down and you'll go after it. And then arriving there that first day at the meetup to get my stuff, and at the dinner where Kent would just talk to everyone, I felt so small and insignificant compared to all of these people, because I was like, oh my God, there's some people here that are like, have qualified for Olympic trials before and have set records for some of the Triple Crown. And I'm like, I've swam Tahoe. That's all I've really done. That's like the biggest thing I've done. And I just felt so tiny, so small and, well, young. Like the next oldest person was of legal drinking age. So I was like, I can't even vote. Like, what am I doing here? And then getting to the little hotel at Saguaro and setting everything up for the next day, meeting up with my kayaker.
Yeah, how did you find a kayaker?
Kent actually recommended a few to us. The first one was unable to attend last minute for some personal emergency. So second one we got pretty good, knew what she was doing, had done it before. So we're like, okay, we'll stick with this one. It's not like we really knew anyone else who could.
How did you feel about your feed strategy? Because you'd really only done feeding like that one, their Tahoe swims, right?
Pretty much stuck to the same thing, used the same stuff, and it's worked pretty well. And Saguaro, first morning, me all the way back in wave 3, knowing absolutely nobody, little 15-year-old me, and just we got on to that pontoon boat and headed to this little beach area where the kayaks were getting loaded, and just everyone was like either chatting with somebody, helping each other like lather Desitin or whatever they used onto their backs. And I'm like, I'm just here. I barely know my kayaker. And I kind of made friends with someone named Emily Lane, and she and I just chatted. We seemed to kind of click pretty well. And that certainly helped my anxiety because she was in my wave, and she was telling me about her swim in Catalina after I told her, like, hey, I have that in a few months. Do you have any pointers? She's like, oh yeah, I got a few. And we just talked, and her paddler helped us both get the Desitin on our backs. And I'm like, okay, so now I have someone I can go to be like, yay, can you help me? And then getting onto that boat to head to the dam, I'm like, oh, I feel tiny. I feel very young. Why am I doing this again? Water felt great that first swim at the start, like 60, 68. It was beautiful. And then all this huge saguaro cacti surrounding the place. And I remember, like, I put my hand on that buoy, I put my other arm up, and we were ready to go. We sent off. Took us about half mile to a mile before we caught up with our kayakers. And during that time, besides sighting, I kind of just put my head down, I kicked my feet, and I went out there. And just being out there was great. The water temperatures were all over the place. Like it dropped from 65 and then literally like about 100 meters further, it would jump to 80. And we were all like, oh, at the end. And just being out there was amazing. And I made a little swim buddy, a little racing partner, Steve Leach. He and I were like neck and neck for the last mile and a half. And he kind of like outtouched me by 3 seconds on that buoy. And I got to the boat with all the other people from the Wave 3 that had finished before me. And I realized I was the only girl on the boat. I'm like, hold up. I'm going to wait a little while. And then another person from Wave 3, the only other, because as all the guys from Wave 3 had already come in, they were done. And so another woman came in behind me. I'm like, I'm not going to get my hopes up, but I think I just won. I was like, I'm not going to like push it. And then when the results came out that night, I went like, oh my God, I won. I was like, maybe I actually can get out there and get that belt buckle that I'm wanting to work for. So on Canyon, I knew I was going to have a tail. Name is Taylor. She chased me down that whole time. And she was my motivator. I have to thank her for that. She was my motivator. I'm like, she was so nice. So, so nice. But I'm also like, I'm not normally a competitive person. Like racing, I was like, nah, not my thing. But there I was like, I made it this far. I made it to this swim with a goal in mind. So I'm going to get it. So I busted my butt that whole swim. And she was only like a minute behind me, which for that long of a swim is really close together. Canyon was shorter than Saguaro, but there was a lot of wind out there. So everyone ended up taking 20 minutes longer than they did in Saguaro, which we were all like, seriously? You gotta be kidding me. But the water temperature stayed in like the low 60s. And we were all of Wave 3 gathered onto the first boat that headed back. And we were all like, so this is your happy place, right? And we're like, yeah. And I finally felt like I had found my people when we all had gotten onto that boat after Canyon, having to kind of like speed back so we can make it to Apache. And that road gave me more anxiety than the actual swims. No rails on the side, just like 1,000-foot drop down the side. And I was like, ugh, no.
Yeah.
But that lake was beautiful.
Yeah, going into this though, so this is longer than Viking's home, isn't it? Longer? Is it the longest?
Yeah. Apache was the longest. It was about 14.5 miles for me.
And how are you feeling
going into that? I'm going into it. I'm like, the longest I've ever swam was 12 miles. It's just 2 more miles, right? It can't be too bad. I was very wrong. It was bad. It was very bad. The start was about 51 to 52 degrees.
Oh, wow.
And we all hopped in, and like, if there was a bottom, I'm pretty sure we would have jumped like a foot out of the air because you could just see them all like flinch, all of us. And there was a lot of pretty language. It was kind of funny. As we all hopped in, I was one of them. There was no shame there because it was freezing cold. And Roosevelt Dam was actually letting in water. So we had to swim against the current, or letting out water, technically. Yeah. So we had to swim against the current to get to the buoy. We were cold, and we had to hold on to the buoy, shaking, shivering, our feet dangling out in front of us because we couldn't get them behind us. And we're like, just start us already, man. Come on. And the first 2 hours were like the smoothest out of all the swims. It was like glass. It was
Wow.
gorgeous. And then it wasn't.
How
The
long did it
wa-
take to
the
warm up?
So I started out like sprinting mainly just because I'm like, I'm cold, so I'm going to kick my legs as fast as I can to feel my toes and move my arms so I can feel my hands. But it took about 30 minutes and it stayed about the same temperature for the first hour and a half.
Mm.
And I'm like patting myself on the back because that's the longest I've lasted in water that cold. But I think probably because I was moving a lot faster than I had been in like 53-degree water where my mom had to drag me out of the water because I was just freezing. I kind of acclimated to it. So after 30 minutes or so, I'm like, okay, this feels nice. I'm like, I could swim in this for however many hours it takes. And like I said, the first 2 hours of that swim were beautiful. You could just see these huge canyon walls and all of the cactus, few eagles. We had a joke running because there's so many vultures around, being like, as long as there's not any vultures circling us, we know we're doing okay. That was the joke for the entire swim. I'm like, did you see any vultures circling you? Like, just for a part of the swim when I was starting to head backwards instead of forwards. That was just the thing. And then, like, the winds that weren't supposed to pick up until noon picked up around 8:30 to
Oh
9.
gosh.
The weather predicting the winds were not accurate at all. Because at noon, they were supposed to be about 20 miles an hour steady. And we were like, okay, make it till noon. And the first bout of wind's going to hit. We're going to be tired, but it shouldn't be too bad. We were wrong. We were all very, very wrong. Because 8:30 to 9, the winds just picked up where they were supposed to at 12. So I was like, I have to go through how many more hours of this? Because the winds were not supposed to die down. If anything, they were supposed to pick up even more. And when they were originally supposed to start around noon, and they were supposed to pick up even more at 2, they had started about 9 and picked up even more around 11. So going from 20-mile-per-hour winds to about 35 to 40-mile-per-hour winds. It was so bad. And like these canyon walls are huge, so it makes it look like you're not going anywhere because they're just so big. It takes forever to pass. And passing the marina/hotel took like an hour. And I'm like, I could just swim over there and be done.
Yes.
I could just swim over there and be done. But it was only like 3.5 to 4 hours into the swim. So I'm like, no, I've swum longer than this. We can make it further. Finally made it past the marina. But there's still this just giant rock right next to me that I've been sighting off of for the past hour and a half. And it continued to be in my line of sight for the next 3 hours. And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere, am I? And I had a grudge against that one rock for the longest of times. And the wind decided it was going to play tricks on all of us because it would die down and be like smooth as glass again. And then you'd be like, oh, thank God. And then you'd have like 5 minutes of peace. And then it'd just pick right back up again as strong as it was before. And I was being tossed all over the place. My kayaker was struggling to keep up. And if I took a feed, I was pushed backwards. So I try to limit my feeds to like no more than 12 seconds. So I didn't have too much extra ground to cover. And I remember like just entering like a little narrow strip between like 2 huge canyon walls. And it got calm for about 15 to 20 minutes. So I just took my time swimming, but to admire like these huge, like different layers of rock and the canyon walls. But I couldn't actually process just how big they were. I was about probably 25 meters away, probably more, from these the sides of the walls. And I thought I was like right on top of them. I'm like, nope, never mind. It would have taken me like 30 seconds to swim over there and touch it. but they are just so massive. It was beautiful. Beautiful. Best 20 minutes of that swim where I could just see the different layers of the rocks and the cactus growing out of them and the bald eagles perched on those things. And then, of course, it couldn't last. So the winds picked back up again. And we were about 4 miles from the swim. And that was about another 2 hours of swimming and kind of hit my bonk about
Oh,
the
no.
6 hour mark. So you see, I always say things in my head that I'll say to people, but I never do. I have too much anxiety for that. to, but I know my kayaker was doing her best, but I was like screaming into the water. I'm like, catch up with me, please. And I'm hungry. I need food. Why are you all the way behind me? And I was just so mad
Yeah.
I was mad at everything
Yeah.
for like 30 minutes until I got my next feed. And the winds did not die down again. They were very consistent and, if anything, getting stronger. And I met up again with my buddy Steve. He was right next to me. And we stayed like there for the remaining 2.5 miles. And what really got me mad at my kayaker, because was still kind of in my bonk zone, and she was like, "We don't have too much longer." It was still another 2 miles, another hour of swimming.
Yeah.
I'm like, "What? What? No, no, we're not anywhere near the end. That's at least another 2 miles." And it was. But I put my focus on Steve, who was right next to me for most of the time. And we were both just being tossed all over the place. Like our kayakers were falling behind. So we just went like, okay, we're just gonna go. We're just gonna go. So we did. And then I took my final feed and he pulled ahead and I'm like, I missed my chance to keep up with him. And he finished about 15 to 20 seconds ahead of me. But touching that buoy was like probably my biggest accomplishment of all those swims, because that swim was physically and mentally probably my toughest swim, because my shoulders were already tired from 2 days of swimming. Beforehand, I had hit my bonk. I was like, sometimes I wasn't actually going anywhere. There's just so much chop. I was exhausted. And the urge to just stop and quit was very, very strong. But Steve was also my other motivator, because after our swims, he would always come up to me and be like, "Hey, that was a great job you did out there." And he's like, "You're chasing me down, kiddo. You're chasing me down." I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna chase him down still. I'm still gonna go with him. And also the reminder of like, hey, I have an opportunity here to win that belt buckle. And that was probably the biggest goal I had ever set for myself, was to be like, be the youngest, not just the youngest person to do this swim, but go in there and kick butt, as my mom liked to put it. Go in there and kick butt. And all, like, my boss was always sending me texts being like, kick their butts. Not quite that word, but so I was like, I'm not going to let them down. They are going out of their way to support me and motivate me. And this is the big goal I set for myself. And I actually want to do what I can to hit it. So I would just get the mantra of being like, hit the goal, hit the goal, hit the goal, hit the goal. And during that swim, just finishing was the goal. Not winning that swim, not thinking of the belt buckle. The goal for that swim was to touch the buoy. And if I got the first female to touch the buoy, then that was a nice bonus. But finishing was the goal. And I set my mind back to just play songs in your head and just wait until the next feed. Play songs in your head, wait till the next feed. And then we got within about a half mile of the buoy. I'm like, okay, play songs in your head, get to the buoy. Just get to the buoy. Because so many people were pulled from that race. And I'm like, I can respect you so much for even attempting the swim because that was not easy. And then the people that swam for like hours longer than I did, I'm like, that is impressive. Like, that is so impressive. Like, that just urge to not quit, to just keep going. I'm like, you are now my superhero because you just didn't stop, even though it took you so long. I'm like, at that point, I would have gotten out. I don't think I could have gotten my mind over that, but you did, and you're now my superhero for that. Like, that is amazing. And I think that's more amazing than finishing first, is just getting your mind to keep going with, even though like you could just hop out, stop any moment. But the fact that they just kept going is like my eternal respect. And like I said, you're my hero. Like, how do you do that? Teach me your ways, please.
I think it's a
But
Roosevelt.
yeah, Roosevelt was, I think I would have preferred it early morning because getting up that day, packing everything and having to drive all the way over there and get the lights ready for the kayak was like nerve-wracking because you didn't just get it over with that morning. You had to wait. And the waiting was the worst part. Not being able to get out there and already be swimming. Now you're just sitting around. So all the nerves are creeping back because you have time to think. And that's kind of scary when it's this big of a thing. Because, like, after the other swims, it was early morning, start, finish, eat something, and sleep.
Yep.
Like, there was no room for really anything else. Like, you just, no time for thinking. But then being left to think is, I was second guessing myself again. Being like, okay, so far I'm in the lead, but this is the last swim. And even though it's only a 10K, there is still time for them to make up and pass me. Or like, what if I just can't do it anymore? And getting ready for that swim is probably the most difficult swim you have to get ready for. Because in the morning, it's for the other three, you just wake up, you throw your suit on, and you go. You just go. There's really no time to second guess yourself. You're already on the boat heading to the dam to start. But for Roosevelt, you have time to sit with everything that's happened so far and all the what ifs that you're going to get that come into your mind, and you just can't stop them. And it's kind of scary just how easily like your mind can go from, oh, this isn't, I'm doing pretty good. Like, I still got it, to, I can't do this. What if this? What if that? All the worst case scenarios that can just enter your head from literally having the time to think. And then finally, we got the kayak set up. We watched wave 1 leave, wave 2 leave after Kent gave all of his inspirational speeches. And then it was like the last swim. I'm going to finish this because it's an out of water start. We don't just get to jump off a boat. We have to run into the water and swim what felt like the longest 10K of my life. And I'd done a lot longer swims, but I think it was just the anticipation of finishing and already being so tired because the winds, once again, were there to just drag us all down. And I ran into the same kayak 3 times because my kayaker was behind me, which was not very helpful.
Oh, goodness.
And I was so frustrated. I was so tired. And then I saw the light on top of the buoy, and I'm like, okay. And I touched the buoy, and Kent was there with Ari, and they were like, yo, yeah, you did it. And I was just so done. My mom was out on the water, or not on the water, right by the shore as I came out of the water. She's like, oh my God, you did it. You won. And I kind of threw my cap and goggles off, and I was sobbing. I was like, I didn't process the fact that she's like, you won, you won. I'm like, I'm so tired. I am so sore. I hate everything, and I hate everyone. I am so glad this is over because I literally cannot do anymore. And I like all but collapsed on top of my mom, just sobbing. And, and then I finally calmed myself down. And she's like, "You won." And I almost started crying all over again because I'm like, wait a minute. I won. It didn't process until I went onto that dock where Kent was and he handed me that belt buckle. And I'm like, wow, did that actually happen? Me, a 15-year-old girl, just won SCAR in the ladies group and got, I think, like fifth overall, which I'm like, this is huge. This is so much bigger than anything I've ever done before, so much bigger than anything I've ever accomplished. And my mom was like, "Don't you lose that belt buckle." I'm like, I am not losing this thing. This is going to be my most prized possession. Because it's a little weird to find someone with a big old belt buckle in North Carolina. But I wore it to school yesterday, actually. And all of my teachers and my friends were like, "What in the world?" And I'm like, hey, I know it's weird, but I worked my butt off for 4 days and 16 hours to get this thing. If I'm not wearing it, I don't know what I'm doing. But just all of the connections I made during those 4 days that felt like an eternity because they just were so long. And I finally found like somewhere I felt like I belonged because at my swim practice every day, I think I've had like two people now recommend mental asylums because they're like, "Are you actually okay? Because who in their right mind would go out there and swim like 40 miles?" And I'm like, well, I never said I was in my right mind, but don't you think recommending me to a mental institution is a bit far? And they just straight up flat out said no. No. I'm like, wow, feel the love. But the congratulations I got after finishing all that and came back for my first practice Monday afternoon because my boss slash coach, because I coach the little kids, had posted the links to follow my swims onto the weekly newsletter. So all 600 people from my team could literally just follow my swims. So I got back and my mom had emailed all of my teachers, my past teachers from last year and my teachers this year. And I was not expecting it to come back with all of these like, "Oh my God, look at what you did." And that was great. Like I could never do what you did. And I'm like, that's what I first thought. That's what I thought. I thought I could never do this. Like if I went back to my 2020 self, just starting to swim, hating the 10Ks I had to do in the lake, and went to go say, "Oh yeah, I just won a 40-mile race," I think I'd probably just go like, "I'm sorry, did I hear you right?"
Yeah.
And then be like, what in the world happened these next 4 years? Because they didn't feel like 4 years. They passed by so fast, yet so slow. At the same time, because I can still remember very clearly hopping into the water to do my first ever 10K, climbing out and being like, I am not doing anything close to that distance again. And I just finished swimming 40 miles over 4 days a week ago.
Congratulations, Lorelei.
Thank you. That's just the growth was significant. And I think that's one of the biggest accomplishments I have. It's just how much it's changed.
Yeah, and you're not even anywhere remotely close to done yet. So you said Catalina's coming up.
I'm doing Chesapeake again this year. I know it's probably going to go a lot more smoothly than it did the first time because I'm already used to being out there and not being in control. And then I got Catalina literally a few weeks later, and I got Manhattan in October. Awesome. And then so far, 2025 is chill. We're looking at Molokai, but that so far I think is the only thing scheduled or supposedly scheduled for 2025. And then August of 2026 is the English Channel.
Because you'll
So
be
I'm looking
16,
forward
right?
to all of those.
Yeah.
I'll be 17 when I swim the English Channel. So
All right. Cool.
looking forward to it.
Exciting. Man, well, I'm glad you found your people, because I think a lot of
Yes.
us feel that way. Is because
Yeah.
I like to say, not that we're crazy, we're curious. So you just live by that. You're just curious, and not everyone is, and it's their loss. So
Yeah.
keep being curious.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for sharing your story. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you were inspired by even just a moment of this story, please share it with a friend. You never know what might push someone out of their comfort zone so that they can find out what they're capable of. And please leave a review with your podcast provider. It truly helps others discover the raw and honest stories of these amazing endurance swimmers. Thanks for listening.